On this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, I recap a truly embarrassing weekend in all facets for the Memphis Grizzlies against the lowly Portland Trailblazers. Can't say that lowly, I guess, because Grizzlies got swept by them. Then from there, we will talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. inching towards a return. Memphis needs him badly, but how should the Grizzlies handle his injury the remainder of the season? And then we'll preview Grizzlies Nets. Hopefully a better effort in this contest than we saw at home at FedExForum over the weekend. I'm Joe Mullinax. It's Monday. Let's lock in on Lock On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's hard to be full of sunshine and rainbows on this Monday. I got to be honest with you. Not the best weekend for the Memphis Grizzlies or Memphis Grizzlies basketball in general. We're going to talk about that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host for this episode, Joe Mullinax. No to Michael Cole. He will be back with us on Wednesday's episode of the show, so you'll have me solo the next couple of days. Thank you for joining us wherever you are doing so. YouTube, Amazon, Apple, Spotify. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, as we are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network here at Locked On Grizzlies, your team each and every day. As I mentioned in the opener, we'll talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. being listed as doubtful for tonight's game in Brooklyn against the Nets. That's a positive. Usually means Memphis is anticipating a return. Thank goodness. We'll talk a little bit about that game against Brooklyn here in a moment. But first, I have to recap. I'm contractually obligated, I'm sure, to talk about the garbage scene that was Grizzlies Portland over the weekend. But first, thank goodness I can talk about FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And I got to tell you, making a bet against the Memphis Grizzlies feels like a sure bet right now, because they have lost 5 straight games. I believe they're 2-12 in their last 14, and they continue to run the gauntlet of poor play. They have not won since the All-Star break, and since that All-Star break, that Milwaukee Bucks game, you remember that? You remember having fun? You remember when it was nice to see this team compete, and they were young and full of spunk, and it was Zaire Williams and Vince Williams Jr. and G.G. Jackson showing all sorts of flashes and making you think, maybe there is a bright piece to this after all. That light is still there. It just feels like we're in the middle of an eclipse. And the eclipse is the reality of the rest of the roster around those 3 guys, especially with Jaren Jackson Jr. out, which has been one of the common denominators, right? Jaren playing has allowed for Memphis to be competitive. When he doesn't play, things like getting swept by the Portland Trailblazers in your own building in a home-and-home back-to-back occur. So let's start off with Friday, because on Friday night, the Grizzlies got embarrassed, and it was bad. They were winning 21-17 at the end of the first quarter on Friday night, and then it was just abysmal. The Grizzlies don't score more than 27 points the entire game. They only scored 92 total. Portland dominates them, and I want to read to you the starting lineup for the Portland Trailblazers in this game. You had the mighty Tamani Kamara. You had powerful Chris Murray. Jeremy Grant, who was probably the best player in the game, which unfortunately for him isn't saying much. Duop Reith and Anthony Simons. Maybe Simons would argue he was the best player in the game. And then the starters for the Grizzlies were Santi Aldama, Zaire Williams, Trey Jemison. I got to be honest, I'm not seeing it with Jemison. I'm not seeing it. This guy got dominated by Duop Reith. Duop Reith outplayed him. And again, not to say that Trey Jemison has a bunch of name recognition, but for a guy that you signed on a 2-way deal, that you had so much optimism for, it's hit or miss right now, man. It's hit or miss. He has not consistently done the things that you need to see a guy like him do to compete and to be good and to be a part of this team long-term. You want to make an argument for Lamar Stevens? I'll listen, because Lamar Stevens played like he wanted to be there. But again, it was another case in the case of Lamar Stevens of putting up numbers in a loss. 19 points, only 1 rebound. But he shot 7 for 12 from the field. He led the team almost. Jake LaRavia, king of putting up numbers in a losing effort. LaRavia scores 21 points, scores on 3 of 7 3-point shots. And yet, the team loses by 30. When Jake LaRavia is your best basketball player, when Jordan Goodwin is tied on the team for shooting attempts, things are not going your way. Vince Williams Jr. only took 7 shots. Gigi Jackson only took 8 shots. The Grizzlies lost by 30? You don't say. I'm stunned that the Memphis Grizzlies were not able to win a game where their 2 best current players didn't take enough shots. What? That's wild. That is crazy. And Santi Aldama continues to struggle. It has not been a good season for him. So if we are taking these games and saying, okay, how do we apply this energy to when the team's trying to contend again next year, this gap year as we've declared it? How do you apply that moving forward? Doesn't look good for Santi right now. I got to be honest. Doesn't look good. He's not having a very good season this season. Lamar Stevens is showing more flashes at the moment than Santi Aldama. And then you fast forward, because again, the Grizzlies get blown out by 30, right? So that's one way that you can lose a basketball game. And they looked listless. They didn't compete, didn't defend, got cooked by guys they shouldn't have gotten cooked by. Then Memphis plays on Saturday, and the Grizzlies get some reinforcements. All right, that's important to point out. Luke Kennard, John Conchar, they didn't play on Friday, but they play on Saturday, and still no Jaren Jackson Jr. We'll talk more about Jaren later. In this game, the Grizzlies fight back. They were down 5 at the end of the first quarter, but Memphis wins the second quarter by 9, wins the third by 13. Holy moly, maybe Memphis is going to blow out Portland. And looking at the roster, maybe that's the way it should be, right? Fingers freaking crossed that we find a way to knock off the lowly Portland Trailblazers, who maybe we should stop calling lowly, because it's not like they're really competing that much better at the moment. And then what happens in the fourth quarter? Arguably, depending on how you perceive these things, one of the best tank jobs the Memphis Grizzlies have done in some time. And I'm an expert of Memphis Grizzlies tanking. I've been around for a while. Dear listener, dear viewer, I've been checking out this Memphis Grizzlies team since 2011. That's 13 years now. I've been writing about or podcasting about this team for over a decade. I've seen the lean times. I've seen the good. I've seen the bad. I've seen this team tank. Because players don't tank and coaches don't tank, right? But it's hard to not watch how that fourth quarter played out. A 34-17 run for the Portland Trailblazers. It's hard to not look at the stat line and see Luke Kennard take 2 shots in 28 minutes of play. I have been one of Luke Kennard's loudest supporters. I think Luke holds tremendous value. But if he's only going to shoot twice in 28 minutes, trade him. Cut him. He's not worth it to you. He has to be a bigger part of the offense, especially with the struggles of the team currently. Thankfully, Santi had a good game, right? We just talked a moment ago about how he struggled for the most part this season, one of those flash games. He was one of the reasons Memphis competed. Vince Williams Jr. had a better game, 21 points, 8 rebounds, 2 steals, 3 blocks, massive numbers for Vince Williams. Gigi Jackson struggled, but he's 19 years old. I'm going to chalk that up to him being young and asked to do more than he should do. But they competed better. They were in position to win, and then the wheels completely fell off. They were outscored between the fourth quarter and overtime, 46-22. So it was an adventure in tanking over this weekend, right? And the Grizzlies are now only roughly 2 games behind the Portland Trailblazers for the 5th spot. The 5th spot in the lottery. Now, the Grizzlies are unlikely to catch the top 4, Washington, Detroit, San Antonio, Charlotte. But Memphis could catch Portland, only 2 games behind. About 20-some to go. It's possible. How the rest of this goes really is going to be fascinating to watch, because it felt like tanking at times this weekend, and they're going to swear up and down, oh, no, we're not tanking. How else can you explain Luke Kennard taking that few shots? If that was genuinely how the game just went, chalk me up, cash me out, I'm good. Goodbye to Luke Kennard. He has to be more aggressive. That cannot happen again starting tonight in Brooklyn, and we'll talk more about that later on in the show. But coming up next, we're going to talk about what to do with Jaren Jackson Jr.'s injury, a doubtful designation for tonight's game against the Nets. That means he's close to a return, 65 games for end-of-season award recognition, all those sorts of things. We'll talk about all of that coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Big fans of FanDuel here at Locked On Grizzlies. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Again, right now, it feels like it'd be a pretty safe bet to bet against the Memphis Grizzlies, but maybe you're a true fan, right? Maybe you're not a believer in the emotional hedge. You're going to stick around to the end and keep putting money down on these Grizzlies, if that is your choice, if you prefer to use FanDuel to aid in your NBA content consumption. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams, not just the Grizzlies, with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, talking Jaren Jackson Jr. and his injury management the rest of the year. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, flying solo on this episode. No DeMichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He'll be back with us on the Wednesday episode of the show, so you've got me for some solo episodes the next couple of days. I'll take you through the Brooklyn Nets game and look ahead to Philly on Wednesday. All that sort of fun stuff on our Tuesday show, but we're knee-deep in Monday, right? And I just went off on a rant about the Grizzlies literally ran the gauntlet, right? They got blown out in one game and they blew a lead in the other. It feels like we're getting the complete tanking experience at this stage with Memphis. One of the reasons they've performed so poorly since the All-Star break is Jaren Jackson Jr. has been in and out of the lineup, right? Injury issues for Jaren. And I want to stress that this in no way, shape, or form is judgment of Jaren Jackson Jr. and his injury. Right now, he's designated as doubtful for tonight's game against the Brooklyn Nets with right quad tendonitis. That injury held him out in that home plus home, 2 straight home games for Memphis against the Portland Trailblazers. And if you remember correctly, on our Friday edition of the show, I thought he'd be out for Friday, back Saturday. That didn't happen. The way that the Grizzlies do their injuries designations, it is likely that Jaren returns for the Wednesday game against Philly. He'll probably remain doubtful, remain out. Maybe they see how he feels in shoot around or something like that. But it's likely he'll be out for the Monday game and he'll come back Wednesday. That is probably how it'll go. Doesn't always go that way, but that's usually how the Memphis front office, medical staff, coaching staff operates. But something that's been brought up, and it was asked of Taylor Jenkins, and it's an interesting question. You now have the 65 games played designation for end of season awards. And if you look at Jaren's numbers, the thing that he's probably best suited for, the thing that you can make the best argument for in terms of him potentially winning an end of season accolade would be the all defensive team. Because even with his worse defensive numbers than last season, he's certainly not going to repeat as defensive player of the year. There's several better options, statistically speaking, at the very least, than Jaren this season. But if you watch the Memphis Grizzlies, if you're familiar with the game of basketball, he's not just going to completely fall off a cliff. He's still one of the better defenders in the NBA, especially in the front court. So that's his sweet spot, is a second team, all defensive NBA. And obviously that impacts contract negotiations. That impacts a variety of things, being at that 65 or more games played situation. That is important for all of those reasons and more. What does that mean for Jaren? It means that he has some work to do still in terms of being in that mix, because Jaren Jackson Jr. significantly, not just an important player for the Grizzlies, but an important player overall in terms of the games that he has played. He's logged 54 games to this point this season. That means he's got 11 more to go to get to that 65 threshold. I think I mentioned a moment ago they have roughly 22 or so games left. Half and half. He makes it to 65. He's eligible for postseason awards and a probable, not likely, but a possible probable defensive selection for the second team. How much should that matter? Individually, to Jaren Jackson Jr., it should matter a lot, right? contract reasons, any accolade you add, obviously the way the contracts are negotiated in the NBA, those end-of-season awards are important. And Jaren is playing at a discount, if we're all being honest with each other. He has certainly earned the likely max contract that he'll be signing here soon, not this summer, but the following summer, as we talked about recently here on Locked On Grizzlies. But once he gets to that 65-ish mark, whenever that occurs, if they decide to shut down both Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart, and that's a topic that I want to talk with DeMichael Cole more about later on this week. I don't want to do it by myself because I have a hot take and I want DeMichael to maybe, if you're an everydayer to Locked On Grizzlies, you know that DeMichael balances me out, right? He calms me down. He soothes me. He's so cool and suave and wonderful. How can I be so fiery and angry when DeMichael Cole is my co-host? When I'm by myself and I'm staring at my ugly mug for 25 to 30 minutes, I can yell a little bit more, right? So I'm waiting for DeMichael to talk about if this is how it's going to be, right? If this is how it's going to play out and you're going to get blown out in one game against the Trailblazers and blow a big lead and lose in overtime in the other, and you're closer to the 5 spot in the lottery than you are anywhere near being a competitive team right now, how much sense does it make How much sense does it make to bring back not just Smart, but also Bane? We'll talk about that. But Jaren has logged the miles, right? Jaren has logged the minutes. He still is capable of reaching that 65-game plateau. For me, that matters. I think he should, and I think he should pursue it, and I think he's going to, right? Again, the progression in the injury report is a positive thing. Looks like he should be, if things stay on track, back on Wednesday. Hooray, huzzah, good. But what happens when he hits 65? Do you shut him down? For me, a lot of it has to do not with the state of the tank, right? Because that is neither here nor there. And again, players and coaches don't tank. I feel like that sometimes when you're watching them blow leads in the fourth quarter to the Portland Trailblazers in their current state. Might feel like they're tanking. But players and coaches don't do that. That is something that front offices strategically maneuver around. That is something that is organizationally driven, not so much the day-to-day operations of the team, right? And I think that when you look at the state of play for the Grizzlies, it's hard to say that there's anything logically they could have done. When you are playing a series of games against anybody that has National Basketball players, or National Basketball Association players, and your roster is missing your 4 best players. And that wasn't an exaggeration this past weekend. Joe Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Marcus Smart, all out. When you're down your 4 best dudes, you're probably going to lose. It's the way that they're losing and the way that this process is occurring that can lead to frustration. As long as Jaren is healthy and ready to go, I'm going to keep the same mindset with him that I'm currently keeping with Bane. Again, we'll talk more about it later this week when DeMichael's back. But when you have that energy and you want to be in a position to get that end-of-season accolade, to develop and build more possibilities for a future contract negotiation, you have a responsibility, not just as a player, but as an organization to show that you value that. Because when free agency negotiations hit, or more importantly for Memphis in their current state of things, contract renegotiations hit, you want players to see, not just hear, but see tangibly that you are passionate about putting the players in a position to maximize this time in their careers. Because you only have a finite amount of time as a professional athlete. That's one of the things that I've grown as a fan, media person, whatever you want to call me. I used to give people a hard time chasing that money, but now you have a window where you can make generational wealth. Tap into that. Tap into that. And the Grizzlies should allow for Jaren, health assumed, to be in that spot. So if he is able to trend in the positive direction that he's currently trending, there should be no shutting down until he crosses that 65-game mark. And even then, if he's healthy, let him run. Let him play, especially if Bane comes back, and especially if Smart comes back. But remember, I don't really think Smart's going to return. But if Bane and Smart both don't come back, once that 65-game threshold is crossed, great season, Jaren. We'll see you next year. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we are going to discuss Grizzlies Nets, whoever the heck is going to play for the Grizzlies. But first, we're going to talk about Locked On launching the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Prize Picks, the good folks over at Prize Picks. It's demon time on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and Goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is a blast, whether you're picking Vince Williams Jr. for more than 2 blocks, Gigi Jackson for more than 3 3-pointers made. However you want to interact with Prize Picks, it's you against the numbers, and it's a blast. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less with Prize Picks. It is that easy. When we return here on Locked On Grizzlies, closing up shop on this Monday edition of the show, talking Grizzlies Nets. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, flying solo, no DeMichael Cole. We've been talking about the Jaren Jackson Jr. injury. Seems like things are trending in a positive direction. I would make sure they get him to that 65 mark, and then it's all house money. But you want to make sure Jaren is eligible for whatever end-of-season awards he may achieve. Again, for me, second team all defense, that seems maybe not a lock, but that's definitely his sweet spot for trying to get that acknowledgement and that recognition that also can help in contract negotiations. And we also talked about the trash that was the weekend of basketball against the Portland Trailblazers. But it's a new day. And one of the beautiful things about the NBA is until the season ends, there's usually a game coming up around the corner. And that is the case for Memphis tonight against the Brooklyn Nets. Should be an interesting contest. The Grizzlies, again, injury-wise, Jaren likely to remain out. But it is also likely that you will see Luke Kennard, John Conchar. They are not on the injury report. Maybe Jaren returns for the Philly game. Those are all good things, right? Again, my big thing going into this game is I need to see more out of Luke Kennard because DeMichael and I agree on a lot of things. One of the things that we've disagreed on most is Steven Adams versus Luke Kennard. I have been one of Luke Kennard's biggest advocates. I've talked about his elite three-point shooting, the spacing he provides, and I've heard all the concerns about longer, more aggressive defenses on the perimeter. Makes total sense. I concede that. That is not what Luke Kennard saw this past weekend. You cannot say that the Portland Trailblazers have an aggressive, long, physical defense. Can't say it. Los Angeles Lakers, sure. Los Angeles Clippers, yeah, absolutely. Most decent playoff teams, which is part of the concern. Sign me up for that take. That's a fair criticism. For him to only take 2 shots against Portland in 28 minutes of play on Saturday night is a massive problem. I need to see him being more engaged in the offense. I need to see less Jordan Goodwin, if I'm being honest. And that's part of this data accumulation point that we're at. I'm sure Luke understands that they know what Luke can do. They understand Luke's skill set. Let's see what Jordan Goodwin can be. Let's give him opportunities. You know who else could have given Jordan Goodwin opportunities before this point? 29 other NBA teams. Okay? 29 other NBA teams. Dig for diamonds in the rough. That's how you found Vince Williams Jr. That's how you found Gigi Jackson. You found them in the draft. You selected those 2 dudes. You converted their 2-way contracts to full standard contracts. They were already part of the system. That's different. That's different. I don't need to see any more Jordan Goodwin. I want to see him eat minutes. That's what I want to see. I want to see him put together NBA tape and be competitive so he can go play for another team. Because again, it's not like Lamar Stevens, who was on an NBA roster when he was traded for with the trade with Xavier Tillman. That's different too. These 3 or the 2-way contracts, the 10-day hardship waiver guys, I'm good. I'm good. I want to see the dudes that are going to be here long term. That includes Lamar Stevens. I think he's earned that opportunity to show what he can be. Luke Kennard, brother, you may not be here long term. You've got a $14 million essentially team option sitting on you this summer. You better remind people, because there's folks that forget. I don't forget. Joe Mullinax remembers Luke Kennard. I'm with you. I'm on your side, but you're making me look silly, bro. I need you to put the ball in the bucket from range numerous times, and I need you to not get outshot by guys that are not going to be on this roster potentially in 2 weeks. Help me out. Help a Joe out. From a Joe to a Luke. Make some shots. Take some shots. We talk about gravity and being one of the top 10 or so three-point shooters ever. I've got you at number 10, Luke. You got to shoot the ball. I shouldn't be talking to you about the same things that I talk about with John Conchar, man. Help me out. Help the Grizzlies out. That will help Memphis be more competitive if they have the threat of John Conchar offensively. Another major piece to look for going into this contest, I mentioned Trey Jemison earlier, hasn't been playing particularly well. And if you remember, the last time that the Grizzlies lined up against Brooklyn wasn't that long ago. The Nets were in a position to blow out the Grizzlies on literally a week ago. And as that process played out, you were looking at a situation where Nick Claxton and the other longer, rangier, again, for Luke, it would make sense to struggle in this game. The Brooklyn Nets have length everywhere. Whether it's Nick Claxton, some other big for the Nets, you need more out of your big men. You can't have this kind of performance. Jaren's not going to play more than likely. So Trey Jemison's going to keep getting minutes. Whoever it is out there, Santi Aldama, Lamar Stevens played some center in that game. Whoever's eating minutes as a big needs to be competitive and needs to put their best foot forward and engage. Again, Trey Jemison, people have been excited about you. We've seen flashes, not nearly enough consistency. Doesn't have to be offensively. It does need to be rim protection. It does need to be rebounding, screening, those sorts of things. You want to be here long-term? That's the stuff that you need to do on a night-in, night-out basis. And then finally, Gigi Jackson. Right? Gigi was 1 for 13 the last time the Grizzlies saw the Brooklyn Nets. 1 for 13 from the field, one of his worst games as a pro. And it's not like Gigi has done that much better recently, right? At least in the most recent game, he was 4 for 15. Not that great. 4 for 15. Not something you're looking forward to in terms of contributions. So you need more from Gigi Jackson. You need to see Gigi go out there and build confidence. And I would like to see the Grizzlies put him in a position kind of like or not Brooklyn, excuse me, with the Portland Trail Blazers, and put Gigi in advantageous scoring situations. Help him find his spots, get him to a rhythm, call plays from him early with finishes at the rim, as open as can be, threes. Prioritize him building confidence because things can spiral quickly for a player that inexperienced, that young. Put him in positions to be successful, even if it is simply help facilitate the set of the offense. We know this guy is going to be open in this spot. Give him some predictability, some things he can count on. And then as he gets to the bucket, maybe draws a foul or two, sees the ball go in a free throw, that confidence builds and grows, and it allows for Gigi to eat more efficiently. So getting Gigi Jackson going as he enters the game, more from Trey Jemison down low so they're not getting obliterated. Again, Jaren, to be honest, struggled against Brooklyn. So putting the Grizzlies bigs in positions to be successful, winning that matchup, or at least getting closer to winning. And then Luke Kennard, come on. You got to shoot more than twice. Hopefully he's back in the starting lineup. He didn't start in the second game against Brooklyn. Or excuse me, I keep saying Brooklyn. He didn't start in the second game on Saturday against Portland. He played 28 minutes, played starter minutes. Lamar Stevens only logged 17. So Luke and Gigi basically interacted and intertwined with Lamar's minutes. I need to see him again. Jordan Goodwin, I'm good. I don't need to see it anymore. I don't need to see Jordan Goodwin logging 30 minutes and doing the things he's doing. Maybe you do. You can let me know in the comments. You can tell me how I'm hating or wiling out or whatever you want to. Joe, you're full of it. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm telling lies. Because I feel like I'm telling the freaking truth that I want to see Gigi Jackson. You want Gigi to start instead of Jordan Goodwin? Sign me up. One of those two guys needs to be in a position where they're prioritized offensively, and neither of their names are Jordan Goodwin. Either of those guys would be good with me. And hopefully the next time I see you here on Locked On Grizzlies, I'm in a better mood. Because even if Memphis loses, hopefully the things make a little bit more sense in terms of the rotation, who's playing, who's taking these shots. Thank you so much for joining us here on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Friendly reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, covering the top sports stories of the day 24/7 with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows that cover every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Again, tomorrow I'll be flying solo once more. We'll talk Grizzlies Nets, all those fun things, hopefully have some more positivity to spread. It was a rough weekend. I'm sorry. It's tough to be positive after watching what the Grizzlies did at home. And again, that's one of the frustrations. FedExForum used to be a place that people feared coming to. It's a laughingstock now. The Portland Trailblazers, who hadn't won a game back-to-back in a long time, were able to knock off Memphis in that fashion. There's lots of context that matters in that spot. Still hurts in the moment. Hopefully we have a little more positivity to share on our Tuesday episode of the show. Wherever you get your podcasts, like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Amazon, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Check us out each and every time we drop a new show. I am Joe Mullinax, and I hope you have a wonderful Monday. I hope you have a great start to your week, and I'll catch you back here tomorrow on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay locked in.